When the Titan Protocol is initiated, the world as we know it will be transformed by a force of unimaginable power. Experience the epic scale of our latest sci-fi drama, where humanity meets its greatest challenge. Click subscribe now and be there for the activation of the future.
The moment my brother said it, I felt a familiar pull in my chest, that old reflex to make myself smaller. We were standing in the lobby of the Whitmore Hotel in downtown Chicago, right before my father's retirement dinner. 60 guests, 3-course meal, the kind of event my family spent months planning. My brother had flown in from Phoenix. My mother had a new dress. Everyone was dressed like the occasion meant something. I had just walked in from the parking garage, still in my work clothes because I'd come straight from the office. My brother looked me up and down the way he always has, that slow appraisal that's supposed to feel casual but never does. "You couldn't even change?" he said. Just loud enough. A few cousins nearby heard him. "This is Dad's night, not some networking thing." I didn't respond. I've learned not to. What my brother didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the reason I couldn't change was because I had spent the afternoon in a glass conference room on the 42nd floor of a building 12 blocks away, signing the final documents on a $340 million acquisition. The company we acquired? It had been founded by my father's former law partner. The irony of that wasn't lost on me. But I wasn't thinking about irony right then. I was thinking about irony right then. I was thinking about how my brother still looked at me like I was 17 years old and borrowing his car without asking. 20 minutes later, the hotel's general manager appeared at the entrance and walked directly to me. I had stayed quiet near the coat check, trying to be invisible the way I always try at these things. He extended his hand and introduced himself and then said, in front of my brother, in front of my mother, in front of my father who had just walked in behind me, "Ms. Hartwell, it's an honor to have you here. We've upgraded your table to the private dining room. Our team wanted to make sure you were comfortable." The general manager had recognized me because his hotel was one of several properties managed by a firm in which I held a controlling stake. He didn't know it was my father's retirement dinner. He was just doing his job. I watched my brother's face go through about 6 different expressions in 3 seconds. I didn't explain, I just said thank you and followed the manager inside. That was 3 months ago. But that moment, that specific moment in the lobby, was only the surface of something that had been building for years. The real story started much earlier than that. It started the way these things always start, quietly and in private, where no one was watching. I grew up in a house where the future belonged to my brother. This wasn't something anyone ever said out loud. It was communicated in other ways. In who got the car on weekends. In whose report card went on the refrigerator. In who my father introduced first at his firm's holiday parties. My brother is 4 years older than me, and from the time I was old enough to notice, he was the one my father talked about when people asked how his kids were doing. I wasn't difficult. I wasn't a problem. I was just in the background, like furniture that matches the room so well you stop seeing it. My father is a retired attorney. Corporate law, 40 years in Chicago. He is not a cruel man. I want to be clear about that, because what I'm going to describe isn't cruelty exactly. It's something quieter and in some ways harder to name. He genuinely believed my brother had a specific future and that his job was to protect it. I think he genuinely believed he was doing right by the family. He just never asked whether his version of the family included me the same way it included everyone else. I figured this out gradually, the way you figure out most important things, not in one moment, but in the accumulation of small moments that you eventually can't ignore. When I was 22, I applied for a position in the rotational leadership program at Arcadia Capital, one of the top private equity firms in the Midwest. It was extremely competitive. They took 8 people per year out of hundreds of applications. I was one of 8. I never started. My father told me the offer had been rescinded. He said the firm had gone through a restructuring and the program was on hold. I believed him because he was my father, and why would he lie about something like that? I spent the next several months recalibrating, trying to figure out what I'd done wrong in the interview process. I found out the truth 6 years later when I was sitting across from a woman named Cecilia at a board meeting. Cecilia had been at Arcadia Capital for 15 years. She mentioned a leadership program, and I mentioned I'd once been offered a spot, and she stopped and looked at me with the specific expression of someone trying to figure out how to say something awkward. The program was never on hold, she said. We've run it every year without interruption. I drove home from that meeting in complete silence. 45 minutes on the interstate, hands at 10 and 2, thinking about a version of my life that had existed and then been closed off before I ever had the chance to walk through the door. That night I called a contact at the firm, someone I had worked with on an unrelated deal, and asked if she could pull anything from the old files about my application. I told her it was a personal matter. She came back to me 2 days later with something I was not prepared for. There was a letter in the file, on my father's letterhead, addressed to the managing partner at Arcadia Capital. In it, my father had expressed serious concerns about my readiness for the program. He said I was going through a difficult period. He suggested it might be better to delay my participation and give me time to stabilize. He used the word fragile. He had done it 3 days before I found out I wasn't starting. I sat with that for a long time before I did anything with it. The thing about being the invisible one in a family is that invisibility has its uses. Nobody monitors what you're building if they don't think you're building anything. Nobody tracks your movements. Nobody asks you too many questions about your finances or your work or your deals because, frankly, they don't expect the answers to be interesting. I started small. I didn't go back into private equity right away. I spent 2 years in commercial real estate, then moved into fund management, then began acquiring equity stakes in companies I believed in. I structured everything carefully. I used holding companies. I was patient in a way that felt unnatural but that I had been training myself toward since my mid-20s. By the time I was 31, I had ownership interests in 11 companies across 4 sectors. The combined valuation, conservatively, was somewhere north of $400 million. Nobody in my family knew. Not my brother, not my mother, and certainly not my father. This wasn't a deliberate secret exactly. It was more that no one had ever asked. My family assumed I was doing fine in finance stuff, which is how my brother described my career at Thanksgiving every year. Fine in finance stuff, like I was balancing a decent 401k. The hotel lobby moment was the first crack in that arrangement. After the retirement dinner, my brother pulled me aside in the parking structure. He had that look he gets, the one that's trying to be casual but is actually interrogating. "What was that about?" he said. "With the hotel guy?" "I have a business connection there," I said. "What kind of business connection?" "The professional kind." He let out a breath through his nose. "You know, it would be nice if for once you didn't make everything about yourself." This was Dad's night. I had not said a single thing about myself all evening. I had sat at dinner, answered questions about the weather, laughed at my uncle's jokes, and watched my father receive a plaque from his former colleagues. I had made nothing about me, but I understood what my brother meant. The hotel manager had made me visible in a room where I was supposed to be invisible, and that visibility felt to my brother like I had taken something from my father's evening. That's how our family worked. My becoming anything was an intrusion. I drove home and I didn't call anyone for a week. What broke open wasn't the letter. The letter had broken something inside me privately, years before. What broke open publicly happened at Christmas. My parents have a house in Evanston, about 30 minutes north of the city. We do Christmas there every year, the whole extended family. It's one of those traditions that feels good in the abstract and is exhausting in practice. My father makes a toast. My mother makes our grandmother's casserole. My brother and his wife talk about private schools for their kids. That Christmas, my father had a few drinks and started talking about the future. He does this. He gets philosophical at the holidays, talks about legacy, what he's built, what he hopes his children will carry forward. He talked about my brother's law practice. He talked about the investment account he had set up for my brother's kids. He talked about the property in Door County he wanted to stay in the family. At some point, someone asked about me. My father paused just a fraction of a second too long and then said warmly, meaning, well, oh, she's always been the independent one. She'll be fine. She'll be fine. Not she's building something. Not she has her own plans. Just she'll be fine. Like I was a ship he didn't need to worry about because I'd probably drift somewhere decent on my own. I excused myself to get more water and stood in the kitchen for a while looking out the window at the backyard, at the oak tree I used to climb when I was 8. My sister-in-law came in to refill her wine and saw my face and asked if I was okay. "Long drive," I said. She nodded and went back to the living room. I stood there a while longer and thought about my father's letter. The word fragile. The 2 years I had spent rebuilding after Arcadia. All the things I had built since then that he had no idea existed. Fine, I thought. We'll see about fine. I didn't go looking for more. But more found me. 6 months after that Christmas, my accountant flagged an anomaly in some old estate planning documents, a discrepancy in the beneficiary designations on my grandmother's trust. My grandmother on my father's side had passed away when I was 19. She had left behind a trust that was supposed to be divided equally between my father and his siblings. My father had power of attorney for her estate. The discrepancy was in a transfer from 11 years ago. A block of commercial real estate, properties in the Gold Coast, 3 of them worth approximately $2.1 million at the time, had been transferred out of the trust and into a limited liability company. The LLC had been formed 1 week before the transfer. The registered agent was my father. The only member listed, my brother. I was not mentioned. I had my accountant pull everything. The more she looked, the more she found. The LLC had since sold 2 of the 3 properties. The proceeds had gone into an account I had no knowledge of. The account was used to fund the down payment on my brother's law office in Lincoln Park. My grandmother had liked me. She called me her quiet firecracker and used to send me birthday cards with $20 bills until I was 25 because she thought it was funny. She had told me once, when I was 16, that she had made sure to leave something for each grandchild. I hadn't thought much about it because I had no reason to. I sat with this information for 3 weeks before I told anyone. And even then, the only person I told was my attorney. I don't know what I was expecting from Christmas the following year. I think some part of me was waiting for a natural moment, for something to present itself. Instead, what happened was that my father called me in early November and told me he was proud of me. Out of nowhere. Just, "I'm proud of you." It caught me so off guard that I actually asked him to repeat himself. He said he had been seeing my name come up in some business circles. He didn't say which ones. He said he had always known I was capable. He asked if I wanted to have lunch when he was next in the city. I said yes, because I was curious. We met at a restaurant near his old office. He was dressed the way he always dresses. Gray suit, French cuffs, the watch my mother gave him for their anniversary. He ordered a club soda because his doctor had told him to cut back. He seemed older in a way that had happened while I wasn't looking. For the first 20 minutes, we talked about nothing in particular. Then he said, "I've been thinking about the family, about what I'm leaving behind." "Okay," I said. "Your brother has the firm. That's his foundation. But I've been thinking about you, about what your foundation looks like." I watched him. "I'd like to be involved," he said. "If there are opportunities where your old man could be useful, introductions, connections, the door swings both ways." There it was. Not apology, not acknowledgement, access. He had finally noticed I was building something and wanted to be adjacent to it. "What do you think I do?" I asked him. He described something vaguely correct but fundamentally incomplete. Fund management, some real estate, a few investments. He clearly had done some research but hadn't gotten far. "Dad," I said, "who gave you the idea that my offer from Arcadia Capital was rescinded?" His face didn't move. "Because I've talked to people there," I said. "The program has never been paused. It ran the year I was supposed to start. It ran the year I was supposed to start. It ran the year after. I've checked every year going back to when I applied." He picked up his glass. "Put it down." "I found your letter," I said. "The one to the managing partner. I have a copy." The restaurant was quiet around us. A table nearby laughed at something. A server moved past with a tray. My father said, "That was a long time ago." "I know. You've done well regardless." "I know that too. So why are we—" "I also know about the LLC," I said. "The one registered the week before Grandma's properties were transferred. I know what those properties were worth and where the proceeds went. I know about my brother's down payment." He set down his glass very carefully, the way you set something down when you want to make sure it doesn't make noise. "I thought I was protecting the family," he said. His voice was quiet. "Your brother had a clear path. You were always going to be fine," I said. He looked at me. "That's what you said at Christmas. She'll always be fine. I folded my napkin. You weren't protecting the family. You were protecting the plan you had already made, the one where I wasn't part of the structure. He didn't argue. I think he had expected me to be angrier, to raise my voice, to give him something to push back against. I wasn't angry. I was past anger. I had processed most of this in the 3 weeks I sat with the documents, and in the months after that, and in all the years before I even knew what I was processing. "What are you going to do?" he said. Not a question exactly. "Nothing," I said. "I'm going to finish my lunch." He blinked. "I didn't come here to threaten you," I said. "I came because you asked me to, and because I wanted to see what you actually wanted. Now I know." I picked up my fork. "The answer is no. I'm not interested in being the connection you didn't cultivate when you had the chance." We finished lunch. We didn't talk about any of it again. He picked up the check as he always does, and I thanked him as I always do, and we walked out onto Michigan Avenue and went in opposite directions. My brother called me 2 days later. He'd heard something from my father. I don't know what version, but enough that his voice had a different quality to it, less certain than usual. "What's going on with you and Dad?" he said. "We had lunch. He said you brought up some old financial stuff, something about Grandma's estate." I did. Silence. "I didn't know," he said. "About the Arcadia thing. I swear I didn't know about that." I believed him about Arcadia. About the estate, I wasn't sure. "But you knew about the properties," I said. Another silence. Longer. Dad said it was estate planning, that it was above board. It wasn't. He didn't say anything for a moment. "Then how bad is it? Bad enough that an attorney would have opinions about it?" He exhaled. "Are you going to do something?" I thought about how to answer that. "I'm still deciding," I said, which was true at the time. What I didn't tell him was that I had already forwarded everything to a trust litigation attorney named Abigail, who had been recommended to me by 3 separate people as the person you call when the problem is complex and quiet and needs to stay that way. Abigail met me in her office on a Thursday morning with the documents already reviewed and a yellow legal pad full of notes. "This is more organized than most of what I see," she said, which I took as a professional compliment. She walked me through the landscape. The LLC transfer was irregular, not definitively fraudulent, but irregular enough to raise questions that would make any probate judge uncomfortable. The Arcadia letter was a separate matter, one involving tortious interference and potentially defamation, though proving financial damages was complicated given that I had ultimately built something significant without the program. "What outcome are you looking for?" she asked. I'd been sitting with that question for months. "I want it documented," I said. "All of it. I want a record that exists. Not necessarily in a courtroom, but somewhere that matters." She nodded slowly. "There's a way to handle this that doesn't require litigation if litigation isn't your preference. The transfer irregularities alone are enough to trigger a review from the estate administration side. That's a matter of record. Your brother is the current beneficiary of the LLC. He'll need to respond. He doesn't know the full picture," I said. "He will," she said. "That's often how these things go." She was right about that. My brother called me on a Sunday in March 2 months later. It was early before 8, which meant something was actually wrong. "There's a letter," he said, "from an estate attorney, about Grandma's trust." "I know. Did you? Was this you?" "I documented what I found," I said. "What happens next isn't up to me." He was quiet for a long time. I listened to him breathe on the other end of the line and thought about us as kids, how we used to build elaborate obstacle courses in the backyard with pool noodles and lawn chairs, how he was always the one who got to decide the rules. "I'm sorry," he said finally. I don't know exactly what Dad did or why, but I should have asked more questions. I should have pushed back when things didn't add up." This was more than I had expected from him. "I know you didn't engineer it," I said. "That doesn't make it okay that I benefited." "No," I agreed. "It doesn't. We talked for almost 2 hours that morning, which is longer than we had talked in years combined. He asked me things he had never asked before, about my work, about how I had built what I built, about what it had been like to watch the family from the outside for so long. I answered honestly because I was tired of performing the version of myself I was supposed to perform around my family. At the end of the call, he said, "I think we should figure out how to fix this. The estate stuff. What's owed to you?" "That's between the attorneys for now," I said. "I know. But for what it's worth, I want to fix it. Not just legally, actually fix it." I believed him. I still do. My father called me 2 weeks after that. He didn't open with pleasantries. He just said, "I hear from your brother that the estate matter is being reviewed." It is. I'd like to talk about it. My attorney is the right contact for that. He was quiet. Then, I thought I was building something that would last. That was all I was trying to do. "I know, Dad. I made mistakes." He had never said that to me in my life. Not once. Not about anything. I let the words settle before I responded. "I know that too," I said. "I don't need you to forgive me. I just..." He stopped, started again. "I need you to know that you were never an afterthought. I just made the wrong decisions about how to protect what I thought mattered, and by the time I understood what it cost you, I didn't know how to say it." I sat with that for a long moment. "I'm not going to tell you it didn't hurt," I said. "Because it did. Years of it. Things I built harder than I should have had to because doors were closed before I got there. The Arcadia thing cost me time and confidence, and I'll never fully know what that program would have been. So I'm not going to pretend that's nothing. I'm not asking you to." "Good." I stood up and walked to my window. My apartment is on the 28th floor, and on a clear day you can see the lake. It was clear that morning. What I can tell you is that I built what I built. And whatever happens with the estate, that's a legal matter, not a personal one. The personal part is already decided. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm done being invisible," I said. "In my family, in the business, all of it. I'm done shrinking so everyone else can stay comfortable. I'm not angry at you anymore, but I'm also not available for the version of myself you needed me to be." He didn't say anything for a while. I could hear him in the background, the specific quiet of his study where he spent most of his retired days. "Your grandmother used to say you reminded her of herself," he said finally. "I used to think that was a warning. What do you think now?" A long pause. "I think it's the best thing she ever told me," he said. "And I didn't understand it until it was almost too late to matter. The estate matter is ongoing in the careful, slow way these things move. My brother and his attorney have been cooperative. My father has not contested the irregularities. There will be some form of restitution. The numbers are still being worked out, but the direction is clear. I don't spend much time thinking about the money. The money was never the point. What I think about when I think about any of this is the parking garage at the Whitmore Hotel on the night of my father's retirement dinner. My brother asking why I couldn't just change my clothes. The specific tone of it, the assumption that I was behind, always the one catching up to a standard I would never quite reach. And then the hotel manager walking across that lobby and addressing me by name, and the look on my brother's face, and how I walked past him into the dining room and didn't say a word. I didn't need to say a word. That was the whole point. I spent a long time in my life trying to get my family to see me. Trying to prove something, to earn a version of recognition that kept moving just slightly out of reach. What I eventually understood, and what cost me years to understand, is that the recognition was never going to come from them. It was never theirs to give. What I built, I built. What I have, I earned. The people in my professional life who respect the work don't do it because of my last name, or because my father made introductions, or because any door was opened for me. They do it because the work is real and the results are real and none of it required anyone's permission. My brother and I had dinner last month, just the two of us, at a place he chose near his office. It was good. We talked about his kids, about my upcoming deal in Nashville, about a TV show we both somehow ended up watching. It felt like what it would have felt like if we'd grown up differently. Easier. More honest. He asked at the end of the night if I thought things could be different going forward, with the whole family. "I don't know," I said, "but I think they can be more honest. That's something." He nodded. He picked up the check without making it a whole thing, and I let him, and we walked out into the March night, and it was cold the way Chicago was always cold in March. and we stood on the sidewalk for a minute and just existed in the same space without performing anything. "Call me more," he said. "I will," I said, and I meant it. The truth is, I don't need my family to understand everything I've built. I don't need my father to have been different or to rewrite the years he made smaller. I needed to stop waiting for permission that was never going to arrive, and I needed to stop letting the people who underestimated me define the size of what I was allowed to want. That's the thing they don't tell you about being the overlooked one. The invisibility that was supposed to limit you, it's also the thing that let you build without anyone watching, and by the time they looked up, you had already become something they never planned for. I drove home that night through the lit-up grid of the city, across the river and up through Lincoln Park and home, and I thought about my grandmother and her birthday cards with the $20 bills and the word she used for me, quiet firecracker, and I thought that she would have understood all of it, the long way around. The patience. The thing you build in the dark before anyone thinks to turn on the light. She would have laughed, and then she would have asked to see the numbers. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since all of this happened. Not in a mystical way. I don't believe the universe was keeping score on my behalf, but I do believe that what you repeatedly choose over years and years eventually becomes visible. It has to. The choices compound the way interest compounds, quietly, invisibly, and then all at once. My father chose, over decades, to invest in one vision of the family and leave another one to fend for itself. That was his choice, made consistently across hundreds of small moments, whose future got planned for, whose name got mentioned at dinners, whose inheritance got quietly redirected. He thought he was protecting something. What he was actually doing was building a wall he didn't realize I could see from the other side. And I chose, just as consistently, to build anyway. Not to prove something to him. I want to be honest about that, because I think it matters. I wasn't building in spite of him, at least not consciously. I was building because the work was real and the goals were real, and I had a genuine belief that what I was doing was worth doing. The anger I felt when I found out about Arcadia, about the estate, about the letter, that came later. The building came first, which I think is the only reason any of it worked. What I understand now, looking back at the woman I was at 22 who got a phone call telling her an offer had been rescinded, is that she made a choice in that moment too. She didn't collapse. She recalibrated and kept going. That's not a small thing. I wish I could tell her it wasn't a small thing. Cecilia's face at that board meeting, the careful expression of someone trying to figure out how to say something uncomfortable, that face changed my life. Not because of what she told me, but because of what it forced me to finally look at. The truth had always been there. I just hadn't had the piece I needed to see it clearly, and once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it, and I had to decide what kind of person I was going to be about it. Someone who burned everything down, or someone who documented everything carefully and then let the truth do what truth does when it's given enough room. I chose the second thing. That was a decision about character, not strategy. I didn't want to become someone who uses pain as a weapon. I had watched what that does to people, the way carrying grievances like battering rams hollows you out, makes every relationship transactional, makes every room feel like a courtroom. I didn't want that life, so I handed it to attorneys and I kept going to work and I let the process move at its own pace. My brother said he was sorry. My father said he was right. Neither of those things erased what happened. But both of them mattered because they were true. And truth has weight even when it arrives late. What I'd say to anyone sitting with something similar is this: the energy you spend waiting for recognition from people who have decided not to see you is energy you could spend becoming someone who doesn't need it. That's not detachment, it's not coldness, it's just a very practical form of self-respect. You build, you document, you keep your head clear and your records clean, and you trust that what is real will eventually be undeniable. My grandmother called me her quiet firecracker. I think she knew something about this. Some people make a lot of noise and leave a lot of smoke. Others burn steady and low and long, and the heat they generate is the kind that actually changes things. I'd rather be the second kind. I always have been. I just didn't always know it was enough. It is. It always was.